All right, guys. So here is the video for the slides today, or for the virtual learning day. We're going to go over 7.1, 7.2. 7.1 starts with the first president, and we all know who that is, I hope, George Washington. Okay, so Washington takes office. This is what they're going to start with. Really where we start talking about U.S. history. So George Washington becomes president in 1789 and began getting a group of advisors together called a cabinet. So we've talked about a cabinet before. Cabinet is people the president picks to be his advisors and to sit around him and give him advice on different areas where he may not be very educated in. Like, we know George Washington was a general, so he's very good with the war stuff, but he may not be very good with the treasury stuff or setting up the banks or judicial system or things like that. So he appointed different people to those positions to advise him. Then we have what's called the Judiciary Act of 1789. Congress was able to create a federal court system to rule on constitutional issues within the new country. Okay, so what that did, we already had the state court systems and the Supreme Court. Okay, so the federal court is basically just a higher court than the state, but lower than the Supreme Court. Okay, the federal court system, they ruled on constitutional issues before they got to the Supreme Court. Okay, because remember, Supreme Court had appellate jurisdiction, which means that things were appealed to them, and so the federal court system was for the entire country. Then we know about the Bill of Rights. It was added to the Constitution to set limits on federal government and identify liberties of citizens. We've talked about that. We've gone over the Bill of Rights. You guys are pretty good with that, and we know why they were added to help ratify the Constitution for some of the other states. Okay. The new economy. So, brand new country. We have things that things are not just really starting to happen for the United States. Alexander Hamilton proposed a plan to pay the United States debts and a means for borrowing money. So these are things he proposed. What he wanted to do was to help boost the United States credit. Okay, so they're a young country. Not a lot of people trust them. Not a lot of people are going to loan them money. So they're already in debt because of war. So he wanted to start paying back those debts before they started doing anything else. That way, other countries would start to trust the United States, and they would be able to create allies that way. So Hamilton's plan faced opposition, especially from the southern states. Hamilton proposed a compromise that would bring the nation's capital to the south, which would be Washington, D.C., because currently it was New York, and they moved it to Philadelphia while they were getting Washington, D.C. ready. Now, the Southerners weren't really a huge deal or a huge fan of this Hamilton's plan because the South didn't have much of that debt built up, or they didn't have a lot of debt in their states. A lot of it came from the North, where the capital was, obviously. So by moving it to the South, the capital to the South, this helped the Southerners believe they may have more. Obviously, things around a capital city are going to be better. Things happen more often around a capital city. So moving it to the South would give them more prestige. Okay. So he was eventually able to come to that compromise with the southern states, and he persuaded Congress to establish a national bank. Hamilton proposed taxes on imports, U.S. products, and citizens to raise money for paying debts. Okay. So again, these taxes are things that would help pay for stuff in the United States. These are not taxes like we had with Great Britain, where all the money went back to Great Britain. All this stayed in the United States at the time. Okay, the first cabinet. So these are the four guys that George Washington chose to be in his cabinet to help him with things he needed advice on. Okay, so Edmund Randolph, he served as the Attorney General and later as the Secretary of the State under President Washington. Thomas Jefferson was the first Secretary of State, so he was before Edmund Randolph. Henry Knox was the first Secretary of War. Alexander Hamilton, the first head of the Department of Treasury. Okay. So then Alexander Hamilton, a little more on him. He was the Secretary of the Treasury. He worked to pay off debt from the American Revolution. He taxed imports from other nations to raise money. Getting out of debt showed the world that the new nation deserved respect. After quitting his job in Washington's cabinet, Hamilton stayed in touch with his successors. He continued offering financial advice to the government until his death, okay, which we'll talk about more. He gets into a duel with Aaron Burr. Guys, if you've watched Hamilton, the Broadway show, you know that. But Alexander Hamilton continued to help and earn respect for the United States. So on to 7.2, early challenges. Okay, so again, young country, there are going to be some things that pop up that they're not exactly ready for. So they come to trouble in the new nation. Obviously, like we said, challenges. The federal government used its power to stop the Whiskey Rebellion. So what was the Whiskey Rebellion? So what Whiskey Rebellion came from was a tax on whiskey. People didn't like the tax on whiskey. There's a tax on any alcohol that was made, sold, or distributed in the United States. That didn't make people very happy. So they have a rising up, protest this whiskey tax. Washington gets wind of it. He sends federal troops down there to shut it down. Okay, he shuts it down, and he took it kind of personal that they were attacking him after they're just setting up this whole new nation, and that they weren't being team players, more or less. Okay, because this tax, again, it was not something going to Britain. This was a tax to help the American people. So Whiskey Rebellion was kind of a big deal, one of the first big conflicts that they had, and Washington, when shut it down, used a big use of forceful power with the federal troops to shut it down and send a big time message. Hey, we're not messing around with that kind of stuff. It is we're all for one and one for all type deal. Okay. Then, of course, conflicts between Native Americans and American settlers led to a U.S. defeat in the battle in the Northwest Territory. Remember, Northwest Territory is up around Michigan, Ohio, that kind of area, Minnesota. Then General Anthony Wayne defeated the Native Americans in the Northwest Territory and forced the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. Guys, as you know, common theme we'll see here: Native Americans being pushed out of their lands by Americans, or settlers coming in to settle those lands that Native Americans were already living on. Okay, and then problems with Europe. So obviously George Washington has been in war most of his life, right? So he knows what to do, but he didn't want to go to war and be in war with Europe. He didn't want to get involved in anything. So he pushed for neutrality concerning European conflicts. Okay, neutral means not being involved one side or the other. That's down in the speaker notes. I would highlight that. I would also highlight the Whiskey Rebellion. The United States signed treaties with Spain and Great Britain to ease tensions. So they did eventually get some treaties signed where they weren't, involved with that kind of stuff, where they would help here and there where they needed to. Okay, and then John Jay. So John Jay was another important figure. John Jay, we know he helped with the Federalist Papers, which helped ratify the Constitution. And then when a new government was formed under the Constitution, Jay became the first Chief Justice of the United States and established important judicial precedents for the young nation, meaning he was the head of the Supreme Court. Okay, he was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court appointed by George Washington. Okay, and that's all, guys. I know it's quick, fast, in a hurry rundown, but this will help you answer the questions on your Google form for today. All right. So your assignment is the 7.1, 7.2 main ideas questions on a Google form. Fill that out, turn it in, and that's it. As long as you guys have checked in with me on the Google Meet, answer those questions, and then you're done for the day. And then make sure you get your bell ringers done. But you guys are pretty good about those most of the time. Okay. And again, guys, if you have any questions over the assignment or after you watch this video, pop back in the Google Meet, talk to me real quick. I'll answer your questions, and then you can get your assignment done. Okay. Have a good virtual day. I will see you guys tomorrow.